What's the hardest part of marketing for most CEOs and small teams?
First, it's figuring out what to do for marketing in the first place. And second, it's actually doing the marketing activities consistently.
And that's usually because there's no plan or framework to guide your marketing activities and investments.
So you flounder and get mediocre results at best. So instead of building momentum, you're stuck spinning your wheels. Today, we're showing you how to change that with a simple, strategic way forward. Hi, I'm Steve Phipps.
And I'm AnnieLaurie Walters. Welcome to the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. Over the past 6 episodes, we've walked through the guide marketing framework one step at a time. We have all of these episodes listed in the show notes. You can go back and even start with our very first episode, which is an overview of the entire framework to get the context. Because today, we're diving into frequently asked questions about how to apply this in the day-to-day operations of your business.
Because learning this framework is the first step. And the challenge is applying it, especially when you're juggling all the other hats that you're wearing as a CEO or a business owner.
So in this episode, we're hitting pause and we're going to review, and we're going to get practical, and we are going to try to help you put this into practice in your business.
So whether you're brand new to the guide marketing framework or trying to lead your team through it, this episode will help you turn strategy into action.
And just to be clear, you don't need a big team, a fancy tech stack, or a 6-figure budget to make the guide marketing framework work for your company.
What you do need is clarity, focus, and a bias for action. And that's what this episode is about. It's helping you move forward with what you have, where you are.
So let's jump in. We're breaking this episode into 5 parts, one for each step of the guide framework. We will talk about the roadblocks that we see, how to work through them, and address some of the most common questions that we've received for each one of those letters in the guide marketing framework.
Let's get started at the beginning with G, generate your story and your strategy.
Okay, Steve, here's one we get a lot. What if I'm not sure who our ideal client really is? Where do I start?
Great question, and a couple of ways to answer that. Number one is pay attention and listen to your current customers. One of the things that I encourage people to do and that we will do for clients sometimes is have conversations with them, interview them, ask them questions. Why did you choose to do business with us over a competitor? What problems do we help you solve? Why do you continue to do business with us? There's a handful of questions that you can ask to gain insight into what they're looking for, and you can translate that into other customers. Now, the other thing I'll mention here is the idea of building out a marketing persona. The terms change: marketing avatar, ICP, ideal client profile, but that's put together a written description of who your ideal customer is. So AnnieLaurie, that's things, as you know, what are the demographics? Because we work with a lot of B2B companies. What is their job title? What are their job responsibilities? What are their priorities and goals? What are the questions that they're asking when they're trying to solve the problem that you solve as it relates to finding a company or product or service to solve that problem? And so when you begin putting these things together, this written description of who they are, job description, et cetera, then you pair that with more of the softer things of what they're telling you, the answers they're giving you, their motivations. You pair that together, and that gives you a much better understanding, which can help inform what your messaging looks like, the campaigns you use, the tactics that you develop to reach them to start creating these conversations in the first place.
Steve, how does understanding your story inform your strategy?
So let me define story in this context. We all live in story. If you think about story is a communication device that helps us make sense of the world. A simple story structure is problem, solution, success. We have a problem. Here's what the solution is. Here's what success looks like. If you've ever read StoryBrand by Donald Miller, if you've ever studied The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, there are a number of these story frameworks out there. And so it's putting it into the context of the story that your customer is living in as it relates to what you do, the problems that you solve. And so the crux of every story is the key problem. If you think about, if you take a story like Harry Potter, The problem is you have Voldemort, who is basically trying to take over everything. And so Harry has to go fight him. So there's lots of different problems that come up as a result of that. But your customers have a problem. And so the story is about them. It's not about you. You're a part of the story. And so as you begin to understand your customers' problems and then how what you do helps solve their problems, create opportunities, create wins, now you can start communicating to them clearly. So if we think about these two pieces of who is my customer, how do I understand them? What's the problem they're facing? And then we think about the solution that we bring to the table and how we are positioned to help them. We take on the role of a guide. So in the context of, I'm just going to use Harry Potter for an example. If you've not read the stories or watched the movies, they're great. Go watch them. Go read the books. Dumbledore is the main good guy wizard. He's the most powerful wizard on the good guy side, if you will. He is one of the guides who helps Harry ultimately move forward and win. So you are the guide in the story. And when you understand your customer, you understand the problem, then you can begin to clearly communicate how what you do solves their problems. I've referenced StoryBrand. It's a fantastic framework. I encourage you, read the book, watch Donald Miller, some of his presentations. He walks through the framework because that is a way to put your messaging into a structure that just makes sense. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want to be able to communicate to our buyers in a way that is clear, compelling, builds trust, helps them understand how you help them avoid failure, achieve success, and move forward in that journey with you as the best guide. So selling your product, your service, and getting that clarity between who your customer is, problems they're facing, and then putting it into words that makes it easy for them to understand.
So, how do I know if my story and my marketing strategy are actually aligned with my business goals?
One of the first ways that you can tell whether or not your strategy, your story, your business goals are actually aligned is, does your current marketing, does your current messaging win customers? Does it generate leads? If you're tracking metrics, then you should have some insight into that. And there's other factors at play, but that's a big factor, especially as it relates to your website. If you're not sure, if you don't have clear metrics one way or another, the approach that you could take is have somebody who doesn't know what you do go to your website and see if they can figure out in less than 10 seconds what you do, why it matters, and what they need to do next. If they can't answer those questions, if they can't give you a clear answer of what you do and how you help people, there's a really good chance that your messaging and your strategy and your business goals are not aligned. And that's why when we're working with somebody to develop a messaging strategy, we work with them to make sure they have clarity about who is their target audience. So starting with who are they? Get a written description. And then making sure that the messaging, talking about the problem, talking about the solution, talking about what success looks like, talking about the steps they have to take to move forward, talking about what happens if they don't solve the problem. We make sure that those are in alignment with the customer, and we make sure that it's in alignment with the company, the way that they approach business. There needs to be that authenticity that aligns with the company's values and their brand, so that what's being said is in alignment with who they are and how they do business and with the customer's needs. When you do that, that then is going to maximize the opportunities that you have from a sales and marketing perspective, because you're educating, you're clear, you're demonstrating capability, establish trust, and that increases the percentages of people who move forward in the buyer's journey with you, and ultimately helps you move forward in your business goals, which is, of course, one of those as it relates to sales and marketing, grow and scale your business.
I can think of one way to tell if your strategy is not aligned with your business goals, and that is if your marketing team and your sales team are operating in silos and not talking to each other. Steve, talk to us about that aspect of this for a second.
In the buyer's journey, as folks come in from different ways, means, and methods, and they're interacting with content that marketing has created, and they get handed off at some point to someone on the sales team. Sales and marketing are not aligned. That's going to create confusion, because at some point marketing is saying something and sales is saying something different. And when those two groups operate in silos, they function independently. And so there's not a lot of communication. So marketing does their thing, sales does their thing. And just by the nature of not having that alignment, of not functioning as a revenue team, there's going to be inconsistencies. And we all know that confusion is never good when it comes to sales and marketing. We're trying to help educate a buyer about what we do, how we help solve their problems, how we do it differently than our competitors. So that misalignment is going to ripple out in terms of the impact that's going to have. Because again, they're going to be telling an inconsistent story oftentimes, and that's going to lead to inconsistent results.
Steve, what's a good KPI or metric to track to make sure that your marketing strategy and your business goals are staying aligned?
Well, I'm going to make the assumption here that the business goals are increasing revenue by a certain percent. And so that's where it's then backing it up into how many new customers do you need to bring on board in whatever the time frame is. So if we're talking about a 12-month time frame and your increase is say 20%, 10%, whatever it might be, how many new customers does that represent? What's the average revenue per customer? It's also accounting for your churn. How many of your existing customers do you anticipate losing? Because you've got to replace that to just stay even. That needs to be accounted for in the number of new customers. But then you back it up into the sales process. What's your closing rate? So if you have a 50% closing rate and you need 20 new clients, well, you need 40 proposals to go out. And then you keep backing it up. How many leads do you need in order to get to the proposals? How many website visitors do you need, or how many initial leads and prospects do you need to get to the leads and the proposals? So it's taking that initial number, backing it up, and then looking at what that entails over the course of the year.
Shifting just a little bit, there's often confusion surrounding the difference between a marketing strategy and a marketing plan. Can you please help us understand how these two things have very different functions?
To answer that question of plan versus strategy, I'm going to use the example of taking a road trip. Your initial step is, where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? And you start thinking about, where are we? What's going to take to get there? What's the investment? How long do we want to take to get there? Who's going to go? That's strategy. Strategy is figuring out, where do we want to go as a business as it relates to growing our revenue. That also gets into figuring out who is our target audience. There's a dynamic aspect of your strategy, but it doesn't shift and change constantly. That's giving you that overall sense of direction. Why are we going in this direction? What's the overall mission we're trying to achieve as it relates to growing our revenue? So that gets into the why. When we start getting into the plan, now I should also say the strategy is also where you're going to be thinking about your core messaging. Because again, these are the things that aren't going to be constantly changing. Again, there's some tweaking that happens there, but the more tactical is the plan. So it's the how and the when. So strategy is a lot of the why and the what, but your plan is getting into, okay, how are we going to do this? What is the process? When are we going to do this? Who is going to do this? And so this is where we start putting the strategy into action. Okay, so if we're going on this road trip, we're going to drive from Memphis to Colorado. Well, who's going to be driving? Who's taking care of the meals? Who is organizing where we're going to stay? Who's determining the activities? When are those things going to happen? What's the day we're going to leave? What's the day we're coming back? What's the day that we're going up to Rocky Mountain National Park? What's the day that we're going to do X? What's the day we're going to do Y? So strategy, big picture, why and what. Plans are going to be more around the how and the when. So the tactics, these are going to change more quickly because, again, the marketplace is changing. And so the tactics that they've worked yesterday may not work today, but that's the general distinction between the two.
And that all goes back to the question that I asked you a few minutes ago about alignment, right? Are the marketing strategy or these activities that we're doing to market the business, are they aligned with the goals? We see sometimes businesses just doing marketing, just sort of in its own little siloed vacuum, and getting caught up in the trends or getting caught up in vanity metrics or whatever the new shiny object of the marketing world is on social media. And it's not really connected to a strategy. It's what I hear you often say is spaghetti marketing, throwing something against the wall just to see what's going to stick. And we know that's not effective. So we start with a story and a strategy, but then the strategy has to turn into some tactics. So how do I go about building out that tactical marketing plan? You know, things like blogs, social media, email marketing, that sort of thing.
This is where it's important to understand who's your customer and understanding the process they go through when they are buying. And one of the things that we take into consideration when we're thinking about a customer's personas, one of our clients' personas, is, are they a first-time customer? Are they brand new to what you do and educating themselves about the basics? In that case, we call them greenfield. Or are they a switcher? Are they somebody who has experience with your competitors? They're familiar with the types of services that you provide, but for whatever reason, they're looking for a new partner. The reason why that's important is because their journeys are going to look slightly different, or in some cases, vastly different. But each of them has questions at different stages. And so when we think about the tactics, it's thinking about the steps, or if we go back to the sales process, what are the steps that your customers go through to make a buying decision? Something triggers, they're looking for what you do or a solution that you may provide. Where are they gathering that information? They're going to Google, they're going to perplexity.ai, they're going to ChatGPT, they're educating themselves, they're starting to gather information. Now, there's also a place in here too, because a big part of sales is outbound efforts and activities. So it could be that your outreach to them or some sort of an outbound marketing campaign is the trigger that gets that person considering what you do. So there's a variety of different triggers here, but it's thinking through, what are those triggers? What is it that's causing them to look for information? Where are they gathering information? We know people go to Google. Some people go to Reddit and some of the different chat forums, and they're asking questions. Who have you used? They're asking the questions of their peers. So that's where the tactics are driven by, where are your buyers going to get their information? There's this distinction of what's called inbound marketing, and that's doing what you need to do on your website, content, optimizing it for the search engines. Sometimes that involves pay-per-click advertising to be visible when somebody is searching for what you do, or they're asking questions that you can answer. And so that's the whole process of search engine optimization, creating articles, etc. And then there's outbound marketing, which again could be any number of different outbound tactics that could be leveraging LinkedIn. Some people will use cold outbound emailing. It could be some sort of paid advertising that is reaching people to create awareness. So again, there's any number of combinations there, but it's make a list of all the tactics, make a list of where they're going. Are they on social media? Are they going to LinkedIn? And it begins by identifying where are they gathering information. I give you a for instance here, because again, there's a lot of different use cases here. Let's go with an inbound scenario. I'm just going to use the example of bookkeeping services for small businesses. If you're a CEO and you're looking for bookkeeping services, and maybe you've been doing it in-house and it's time to outsource it. But let's say you're looking for bookkeeping and you're looking for CPA services. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to ask questions? Or of whom are you going to ask questions? My guess is if you're in a peer group like Vistage, or somebody on your team's in a networking group like BNI, you're going to ask people there. So that's where a strategy can be making sure that you have referral sources so that when somebody's asking, you are who they're going to refer and recommend. If you have a bookkeeping and CPA business, maybe that's being a part of a BNI networking group. So that's part of your strategy. But also, if you're the CEO looking for that service, you're probably going to end up on a search engine at some point, even if that's just to verify and validate companies that have been referred to you. Or it could be that you're looking for somebody that has experience in your industry specifically. So you go in and you search for bookkeepers and CPAs who work with engineering companies. Let's say you have an engineering company, and you're going to find companies that are going to pop up. So you're going to start asking questions. You're going to look at their websites. You're going to start making comparisons. And maybe there's one of those websites, you read some articles, they answer questions intelligently. You like what you've seen. Maybe there's a video of some of the folks there, so you get a chance to watch the video. So now we've interacted with, that site was optimized for the search engines. They have really good content. They're informing you with content. Their website, they upgraded their online presence because you're able to find the answers that you needed. They've got a clear sales process because they make it clear what to do next. So you take that next step, maybe you schedule a call with them, and then ultimately you're going to make a decision, maybe them compared to another. And maybe what happens is you get to that website, and maybe you don't do anything initially. Maybe you read a couple of articles, but you're not ready to schedule a call, and then you leave the website. But then over the next few days, you start to see that you're getting ads popping up on different websites, and you're seeing ads for that particular business. So now they're using retargeting ads to stay in front of it, to keep that awareness going. So maybe you end up back at their website, schedule a call. So again, I can keep talking because there are a lot of different tactics, and there are a lot of different ways to put the tactics together based on who your audience is and how your business is structured, the size of your business, what's already working for you, what's not working. So really, it's one of those things I would say, if you have questions about that, take our assessment. Feel free. You can reach out and schedule a call with us and we can have a conversation, because there's a lot of different ways that can get used and tailored based on each company's position, goals, target audiences, et cetera.
Okay. So once you've got a clear strategy in place and you know what you're trying to say, the next step is making sure people can actually hear you.
That brings us to the second step in the guide marketing framework: upgrade your online presence. Because your message, your story doesn't matter if your online presence is working against you.
So let's dig into what this really looks like and what to focus on if your website and digital presence feel more like a liability than an asset. Okay, Steve. So, first question up with regard to upgrading your online presence. How do I know if my website is actually helping my company grow?
One is, are you getting leads? Look at the results that you're getting from it. A lot of times what happens is a website was built several years ago. Maybe it looks nice, but the question, is it really doing anything? If you're getting leads, fantastic. Could you be getting more? If you're not getting any leads, well, that's a problem if you're hoping that your website is going to generate leads. For some people, they just want a static website that just validates that they exist. And in that case, they're not worried about generating leads. If that's your situation, I don't know that we're going to add a whole lot of value to you at this stage if you're content with that. But if you're looking for more, then I would encourage you, go take a look at your website and you can run a couple of quick tests here. One's called the grunt test. So the idea is, if you were a caveman and went to the website, could you figure out within 5 to 10 seconds about that website, about that company? What do they do? Why would it matter to you? And what to do next? So run that test of your website. Now, you know what you do. So imagine that you don't. Is that clear? Have somebody that you know who doesn't know what you do go to your website. See if they can answer that question. Those 3 questions in 5 to 10 seconds. The other test is the you versus we test. And that is, does your content focus more on you? In other words, are there more instances of the words and the phrases we, us, and our than there are you? So talking to your customer. You want more instances of you and your, talking to your customers, talking to your buyers, than we and our. If that's reversed, if it's more about us, that's a really strong sign that your website's not helping you grow, or at least it's not helping you grow as much as it could. Now, the other thing too is, when was the last time you updated your website? If you haven't updated your website in several years, there's a strong reason to think that it's just sitting there and it's not helping you grow.
Okay, here's another question that we get a lot. Company comes, they have decent website traffic, but they're not getting leads. So you said that one of the main ways you can know if your website is helping you grow is, are you getting leads? Well, what about the business owner who's looking at their traffic and scratching their head wondering why this traffic isn't actually producing leads? What's broken?
It could be any number of things, but I would go back to the answer that I just gave to the previous question, and that's, take a look. Is the messaging clear? Can people figure out what you do, why it matters? But then I would look at it from the perspective of, how easy is it to navigate your website? If you have a clear understanding of who your customer is and the questions that they're asking when they are in buying mode, can they easily find the answers to those questions on your website? Or is that information hidden somewhere? Or is it not there at all? Again, I've mentioned this book and this framework before, but They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. It's a sales and inbound marketing framework that we leverage. I'm a certified coach for that particular framework. He mentions in his book that 80% of the buyer's journey happens before a prospect reaches out to a company. And so if people can't get the information they need to answer their questions on your website, that's a big reason why you're not getting leads. There's nothing there that's building trust or credibility. The other thing is, if your site's hard to navigate, if it loads really slow, if it's noisy and messy, has a bad user experience, all of those are good indicators and reasons why your site's not generating leads.
I'll add to that and say, from an SEO perspective, you can get a lot of traffic, but it's not the right kind of traffic. So you really need to understand how to use Google Analytics, Search Console, or have someone on your team who can look at that for you. Have a trusted agency that can look at that for you, hire a coach to teach you how to do that. Because I would say that if the company truly is getting a decent amount of traffic and it's not converting, that a key place to check would be what kind of traffic, what keywords are bringing the traffic to your website, because those tools will tell you that. Like we can look in tools like Google Search Console, and SEMrush is a tool that we use, and it will tell you the percentage of traffic that a keyword is bringing to your website. That intel is really key in helping you converting more leads from your website, is understanding what are the search terms that's bringing you the traffic. What are the sources of your traffic? Is it coming from social media? Is it coming from your newsletter? Is it coming from even a podcast or a YouTube channel? Where's the traffic coming from? Why are you getting traffic? You got to know that to really begin to untangle the knot of why is all this traffic not producing quality leads.
And, one simple example is where geographically is your traffic coming from? If you do business in a particular region, but most of your traffic is coming from outside of that area, or even if your website is generating a lot of international traffic, but you only do business in the US, that could be a problem.
Okay, Steve, what about the listener who may have just completed a brand new website redesign and they aren't seeing any difference in their traffic or their leads or their conversions? And they're wondering what happened? Why is this not working?
Yeah, we see this scenario a fair bit, actually. And so a couple of things here. Number one, there are professionals, graphic designers, folks who are very capable of building websites that look really good. However, that does not always equate to a website that also drives traffic and generates leads and customers. I've seen a number of websites that looked great images, that sounded good. The language, the verbiage was clever, but it wasn't clear. And so in those instances, again, people left because it was unclear, or in some cases, maybe the website was built on a template that just looked generic. We've recently worked with someone who just came on board as a client a couple months ago, and they were in this scenario. And unfortunately, they were really held captive because the company built their website and was doing the marketing. They weren't getting the results they were wanting. In some cases, you have an existing website, changes and updates can be made to that existing site to get better results, whether that's reworking layouts, updating messaging, doing things to optimize it for the search engines that weren't done initially. So it doesn't always mean that you have to redo your website, redesign a website, especially if you just had it done recently. In some cases, that is the right choice because you might be limited in terms of what can actually be done with your current website. Unfortunately, there are times where the best move is to get a new website, redesign it. And there are times where your existing website can be repurposed or revamped some so that you do start getting more traffic and more leads.
Okay, let's talk about social media, especially within the context of B2B marketing. What should B2B companies be focusing in on with regard to social media?
So the default answer, especially for B2B companies, is LinkedIn. But even there, the question I will ask is, where are your buyers? Now, again, LinkedIn, because that's for business and professional networking, is a logical place for most B2B companies. In some cases, being on some of the other social networks makes sense. Maybe it is Facebook, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's even TikTok. Again, depends on who's your target audience. Where are they spending time online? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Facebook? Are they going to interact with your content there? So LinkedIn's the default answer, but then taking into consideration where your buyers are. And then two, if you're doing this in-house, what do you have the capacity to manage? It would be better to be active on, say, LinkedIn, pick one social channel that you can do a really good job of, rather than doing a mediocre halfway job across 4 social networks.
That makes really good sense. And one thing that I see a lot when I'm just scrolling social media, different businesses I follow, the ones that are just posting the typical branded content, those posts really don't get much traffic. How should we approach it? Like, if the goal is to get some traffic, to get some interaction on a social media post, it's pretty clear that the typical, branded squares or stock photograph thing, that's not really going to get someone to comment, especially thinking about LinkedIn. What kind of posts gets people talking?
So on LinkedIn, it's not just the post, it's seeing LinkedIn holistically. First and foremost, even before thinking about your content, is your profile. Is it optimized? Does the messaging on your profile, your headline, your about, does it help your buyers who look at your profile understand the problems that you solve? If it doesn't, start there. Once you get your profile updated, a good headshot, a good profile banner, then when you think about the content that you're posting, is it content that answers your buyers' questions? Is it sharing your perspective on things that matter to your audience so you can get into some thought leadership type content? And it's using a variety of formats. As I mentioned, thinking about LinkedIn holistically, there's also the aspect of building your network. So especially there's an opportunity for CEOs as well as salespeople on LinkedIn to connect with your target audience. So you go back to having a clearly defined persona to give you that guidance. Will you intentionally connect with those types of folks? You use Sales Navigator to filter and create lists, but you reach out and connect with those folks so that over the course of time, they have the opportunity to see your content. LinkedIn's a long play. You're building trust and credibility, you're building visibility, and there's different tactics and different approaches and a lot of different systems and strategies that people implement on LinkedIn, which we don't have the bandwidth to go into here. But just suffice it to say that you want your profile optimized, you want to think about who you're trying to connect with, and you want your content to answer buyers' questions.
Last thing on social media, speaking of systems, what's your advice for the CEO or the marketer who's juggling a lot of different priorities? How can they stay on top of social media and not let it be something that they push to the back burner? What's a real practical strategy you could give them?
So for the CEO who's wanting to post on LinkedIn, or if it's the marketing manager, whoever's doing it, the first thing is commit to it. Make the commitment that you're going to do 3 posts per week, 2 posts per week, whatever. Just pick a number, start, so you start getting some level of consistency. Number 2, you can use tools like ChatGPT to help brainstorm that. Think through what's the content that you're actually going to post. What are you going to post about? And then number 3 is schedule time on your calendar to create the content. And again, if you're using a tool like ChatGPT, you can use it, educate it. Don't just take what it comes up with at first blush, educate it, edit it, put your voice to it, but you can use that to give you something to start working with and then schedule it out. You can schedule it directly in LinkedIn. You can use tools like Buffer and other social media posting tools to schedule it out. But if you batch it, just do it in one fell swoop, you could generate, you give yourself an hour, maybe 2 hours, and you could generate, a month's worth of LinkedIn posts and then get it scheduled out.
Okay, Steve, let's move on to the I part of our guide marketing framework that stands for inform with content. There are a lot of different questions that we get with regard to content marketing and types of content and all the things you can possibly imagine. But one I want to talk about first is, should we talk about pricing on our website? And I know that's kind of a real deep cut to start with, but I think it's an important one because that is one that folks oftentimes feel a little weird about. Like, am I supposed to just put all the info on the website? Am I just supposed to lay it all out there? And I think you would say, yes, you should. Tell us more about that.
I would say yes within context. So let's step back and think about when you are the buyer. So let's go back to the example we used earlier of if you're looking for bookkeeping, CPA services for your business. What are the questions you're going to ask? What are the things that you want to know? Well, somewhere in there on that list, pricing is going to be one of those questions because you want to know, does that fit within your budget? Does it make sense for you? Do you feel like you're going to get the value of whatever you would spend with that firm? So when you go to a website, if you're going to a CPA's website and you don't find pricing information, how does that leave you feeling? Is that building trust or is that creating some frustration? Do you want to have to reach out to somebody to get that information, or would you prefer to be able to get it on the website? Dare say most of us would prefer to be able to get that information on the website without having to have a conversation with a salesperson in order to get it. Now, what it does not mean is that you post your exact price. There are a lot of objections that initially come up when this topic of writing about pricing on your website, especially in B2B, a lot of objections. What if my competitors see our pricing? Our pricing is tailored to each of our clients based on their specific needs. There's other concerns that people have. Number one question is, do you have a good idea of what your competitors charge? The answer is probably yes, which means they already have a good idea of what you charge. So you're not giving away something that they don't already know. Number two is our pricing can vary depending on their needs, et cetera. Absolutely. We get that. That's the case in our business. So in that case, what can you do to explain the pricing? Can you give ranges? Can you help them get some sense of what the investment is to do business with you? Because if you provide that information, think about how does that help them? Now, again, some people, we don't want our pricing out there because we don't want to scare them away. Well, if you're already building trust and credibility because you have clear messaging and you're answering your buyers' questions, are you really going to scare them away, or in turn, are you actually going to build trust and credibility because your competitors probably aren't answering those questions? So the other thing too is a lot of times that's a top question that buyers have. And so that's the type of content that can rank fairly quickly in a lot of industries in the search engines is how much does this cost? What does pricing look like? How much should I spend on? And so we've got pricing articles on our website. It's also where having a pricing calculator or an estimate calculator can be another good tool to have. Because again, people want to know how much is this going to cost? Am I wasting my time here? Is this going to fit within my budget? So there are a lot of different ways to answer the pricing question without giving away your exact pricing, but still giving your buyers enough information that they can make an informed decision and know whether or not you're even in the range of what they can afford.
Right. So when we talk about content, we can mean a lot of things. So let's talk just for a second about website content, specifically blog content, because some people may think that it's not worth the time. They may not understand the purpose, and they may not know what kind of content works best within their industry. And, I would say that creating meaningful, helpful content that answers your buyer's questions is the best way that you can start to help potential customers like, know, and trust you. How does that translate into the B2B space?
So the questions that buyers are asking tend to be pretty universal, whether it's B2B or B2C, whether it's products or services. And so using your blog, using your website as a repository of educational information that answers your buyers' questions is a really great thing to do because it becomes searchable content for the search engines, for AI, helps your buyers when they're on your website build trust and credibility when you're answering their questions openly and honestly, unbiasedly, and you're creating content that your sales team can use in the sales process to further educate the buyers. And it can do so more quickly than if you're not providing those answers to your buyers. Now, Laurie, to get a little bit more granular in terms of what do we actually write about? What are the questions? And that's where we can point people to the big five. Now, you may have heard us talk about the Ask You Answer, and it's a framework that I coach on and that we incorporate into our guide marketing framework. And so the big five, there's an article on our website, we'll put it in the show notes, are the 5 questions that people are asking typically. And it has to do with pricing, the problems, comparisons, reviews, and best of. So who are the best of? I'll give you another quick example. Again, the idea is if somebody's going to ask the question, answer it on your website and answer it openly and honestly, because you can point people to it. One of the questions that I've received in the past is, I remember the conversation went something to the effect of, Steve, we really like you. We like your team. We think y'all would be a good fit. But just in the case, for some reason, if we opted not to work with y'all, who would you suggest? Which of your competitors would be worth talking to? And ultimately, we ended up working with that company. But I gave them the honest answer. I said, here are some other agencies here in the Memphis area that I trust, that I know the owners, they do good work. And if you don't feel like we're the right fit, those would be folks that you could talk to. So we wrote that article. We put that on our website. Who are the best digital marketing agencies in Memphis? And what shocks a lot of people is we didn't put our name on the list because all of a sudden, if I put our company on that list, we're no longer unbiased. But the truth is, we're not giving opinions about our competitors. We're listing them out. Again, these are folks that have been in business for a while and folks that we know, and I would say do good work. That is one of those things that builds trust and credibility because I'm not trying to pitch us as, oh, we're always the best option. We're not always the best option for folks, depending on what their needs are and what they're needing to grow with. But in some cases, we are the right fit. And so anyway, it's important to answer those questions openly and honestly.
So for someone who is not doing any sort of content marketing, they're not posting blogs, they're not posting social media posts, coach them through how to get started.
Start with what are the most commonly asked questions from your buyers. You can think about it this way. What do you wish your prospects, your buyers, what do you wish they knew before your first meeting and conversation? Write down those questions. If you're not quite sure what those questions are, they're just not coming to you top of mind, keep a notepad or just write it down somewhere, put it in your phone. But as you have conversations with your buyers, your discovery meetings, your demo conversations, list out the questions that they're asking. If you record your sales calls, go back through the transcripts. You drop it in ChatGPT and ask it to pull out the questions. You can brainstorm with ChatGPT, educate it who your buyer is, but get those questions, frame it in terms of the big five. Use that as a matrix to go through and think about your buyers. And then what questions do they ask you about pricing? What do they ask you about the problems? Not just the problems that they experience, but they want to know what are the potential downsides of this product or service. No, nothing's foolproof. If we buy your product, what are some of the challenges that we could expect? So for us, it might be something along the lines of, okay, if we go with you guys to build a website, what are some of the potential concerns that we might need to have about a website? What are some of the things that could go wrong with it? Just with the nature of websites. So answer those questions. But those are a couple of starting points. What are the questions that you get asked frequently? What do you wish folks knew? Use the big five and use that to create a list of topics and then write out your answers to those questions.
Steve, in our episode that we did on this part of the guide marketing framework, I inform with content. We talked a lot in that episode about AI and how to use AI to create content and so forth. And we do plan to do a series on AI and marketing coming up here pretty soon. But just quickly, as we wrap up questions about this specific section, talk to us about AI and marketing as it pertains to content. What would be the quickest, easiest win for someone who's not using AI to start using AI to help make their content marketing process more efficient?
So many different ways that I can answer this question. I would say part of it depends on what someone's comfort level is with tools like ChatGPT or Copilot, Gemini. Pick your AI tool, Claude. For somebody that is just beginning, maybe they've only used ChatGPT a handful of times. Think of it as a brainstorming partner. And I would say use it to help you brainstorm a list of questions that your buyers are going to ask. Give it some basic information. You tell it, here's who my buyer is. Here's their job title. Here's their age range. Here's some of the problems that they are typically facing. Here's how what we do solves their problems. Give it your website so it can go and get some information about you. And then ask it based on that to give you a list of what are 25 questions. You can even prompt it with using the big five framework from the ask you answer. What are 25 questions that my buyers are going to ask when they're considering our product or service? That's one way that you could use it. If you want to go even simpler than that, ask it to write you an email. Ask it to write you a sales email. Again, you want to educate. The thing with AI, an important principle is it's on you to educate it. You know, AnnieLaurie, you and I have talked through this. I've mentioned this when I give presentations on AI and marketing. Think about AI, these tools, as if you just hired a really smart team member, somebody who's very capable, but they need guidance. They need to understand who you are, your tone of voice. So it goes back to making sure you educate and then take what it gives you and validate it. AI is not always right. It can't replicate your voice, your experience, your perspective. So you want to take it. It may give you something that's 60 to 70% done, but you want to go back and put your voice to it, your experience, your examples. You know, even if you read articles and whoever's writing talks about their personal experiences or who they've worked with, how they've helped clients, the wins and those types of things. That's the kind of stuff that you can input into it. If you want to start getting a little bit more robust, then you can use it to not only brainstorm the topics, but create outlines, and using some different frameworks like Google's EAT framework, which we talk about in our episode on Inform with Content. That's Google's framework for how they measure content on websites. So you can instruct ChatGPT to use that as a framework. And so again, there's a lot of different ways that you can use it to create outlines, to brainstorm, to create content, to edit content. You write the blog post and you give, again, so there's a lot of different ways to leverage it, and certainly more than what we have the time to dive into today. And let me also mention on our website, if you go to Learning Center, you'll see in the dropdown that we have an AI page on the website. So we have some AI specific articles there, AI and marketing, not just AI for the sake of AI, but in the context of marketing. We also have a guide, an AI marketing guide that you can download, How to Win at Marketing in 2025. Talks about how AI is changing buyer behavior, the impact that it's having and will have on search traffic, as well as practical things that you can do with AI. So that's a pretty robust resource that's available on our site for free. Hey, quick pause. If this conversation has you wondering where your own marketing stands, we have a tool that can help. It's called the Guide Marketing Assessment. It's a free tool that walks you through the same 5 steps that we've been unpacking on this podcast and previous episodes. In less than 10 minutes, by answering 25 yes, no questions, you'll see where you're strong, where you have gaps, and what to do next. It's free. It's practical. It gives you a clear starting point because it gives you an immediate score. So there's no guessing, not overwhelmed. Well, it might be a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot that it covers, but there's real insight that you can act on. And when you get done taking the assessment, you will get access to our free marketing playbook, which gives you tactical recommendations for each of these 5 steps in our framework. And it correlates to each of the 25 questions so that there's a clear path forward. So if you go to wayfindmarketing.com, you can take the assessment there to get started. Now, back to the show.
All right, let's talk about the part of the guide marketing framework that most companies struggle with, aligning sales and marketing.
Because whether you've got 2 people or 20, these 2 functions have to work together as a revenue team, not in separate silos. When they aren't working together, leads get dropped, deals stall, and frustration is going to grow on both sides. So AnnieLaurie, what are some questions that we have on this topic?
The first question is, what should be included in a documented sales process? I'm sure this is a super big question. So maybe at just a high level, like what are the main things that someone would need to make sure they have included in the sales process?
So this is going to be contextual, but I would say at the very minimum, you want to make sure that your sales process accounts for each step in the buyer's journey. And as it relates to what does your process look like? What's the first thing that you want somebody to do? So if they go to your website and they schedule a call, what happens then? What are the steps that somebody has to take in order to become a customer? Use that, flow chart it out, put it on a whiteboard, and make sure that you're clear on what's happening in those different steps. Start there. So again, that could look like an intro meeting, which then goes into a deeper discovery meeting, which goes to a proposal meeting, which then goes into a follow-up sequence of communication until you get an answer one way or another. So that's a super simple sales process. But then if you want to start fleshing that out more, you could then account for what are some of the steps leading into that in terms of where are you getting your prospects, the steps to reach out to them. But then again, once they enter into that process, thinking through who is doing, what are the different activities? So you might have a meeting, but then is there an email that goes with it? Do you have some sort of a questionnaire or form that either you are using or that you're asking them to complete? If you're going to take the content that we've been talking about and put it into the sales process, maybe there are a couple of articles or videos that you provide at one of those steps as a standard procedure to answer the buyer's questions. Again, it can get super detailed and nuanced, but the big thing is capturing the steps that the buyer is taking and the steps that you're taking internally to guide them through the buying process.
So in one of our last episodes, when we talked about develop and execute your sales plan, one thing that we talked about in that episode was the importance of marketing and sales collaborating, working together, meeting regularly. What about companies with small marketing and sales teams? Because we've talked about some companies don't have a sales team. It might just be one person who wears many hats. Some might not have a marketing team, same kind of thing. Some might have, 1 or 2 people on both sides. When we're talking about a smaller company, do they need formal meetings?
Formal might be a strong word. I would say there need to be consistent conversations where you are in these various roles thinking about what's happening from a marketing perspective, what's happening from a sales perspective. A lot of the collaboration is so that marketing can create better content that's informed by what the sales team is actually experiencing. So the questions that buyers are asking. Because it works much better when marketing has that perspective and can provide content that the sales team can use. And that's going to answer questions even before a buyer gets to the salesperson. So even in a team of 1 or 2 people, it's still important to have those conversations. So even if you're a one-person operation and you're both the sales and marketing, make sure you're sitting down and thinking through from that perspective. Okay, from the sales side, what are the questions we're getting? Over here on the marketing side, what content could we create? Whether you're outsourcing that or you're doing it yourself using AI, create the content that's going to answer those buyer questions. Let's say you're the CEO and you're the main salesperson and you're starting to do some blogging. And let's say in 3 months, you plan to hire a content writer or a marketing manager, even if it's part-time, but you're planning to hire somebody to take over that responsibility. Well, if you're already in that pattern, that rhythm of having conversations and doing the brainstorming yourself from the sales and marketing perspective and evaluating what's happening from a marketing perspective, is that generating leads, et cetera, then it makes it easier to continue that when you bring somebody else into that conversation, as opposed to having to try to develop it new when you bring that person on.
So that leads me to another relevant question. Who should be in the room when you are planning the sales or marketing campaigns?
Based on my experience with this and what I've seen, one, there's an element of this that depends on the nature of the team. What I think makes sense is for sales to be involved with, again, thinking through what are the questions that they're hearing. Sometimes sales will have ideas or suggestions in terms of the type of marketing content that they would find helpful. So there's definitely a conversation in some cases of even letting them know what is available. So what if we created some kind of a video that answered buyers' questions? Would that be helpful? What if we had articles or some sort of a PDF? So sometimes they're bringing ideas to the table in terms of the type of marketing material that they would find helpful. But ultimately, I think marketing wants to be informed by sales, but you get into the scenarios sometimes where if you have too many salespeople too involved in creating marketing campaigns, it doesn't get done because there are nuances of marketing that the sales team may not have experience with. And so marketing needs to have the freedom and the expectation that they will take that and then build out a campaign. So again, sometimes there's a tension because there are things that the sales team may want that from a marketing perspective isn't the best move. They may want to offer some sort of an incentive or a discount, or there may be something that they want to do that from a marketing perspective isn't going to work for whatever reason. And so again, there's just a natural tension that can exist there. And that's why it's also important to have somebody who, from a leadership perspective, can mediate when needed, whether that's a chief revenue officer, or whether that's the CEO, but that way there can be somebody who can help mitigate that tension when it comes up. So the marketing has the freedom to do what they need to do. Sales has the freedom to do what they need to do. But we find that middle ground of sales informing, but marketing gets to create and get sales buy-in and approval where needed, or maybe the sales manager so that they can move forward.
Steve, you alluded to this earlier, but I wanted to bring it back up to the surface. Can alignment still work if one side, either sales or marketing, is stronger or more experienced than the other?
The answer is yes, and there's context. Because really, this is going to be a fairly common scenario, especially if you have an existing company that's been around for a while. You have salespeople that have been there, they've been successful, or even if your sales team is new and your marketing team is new, you might be bringing in an experienced salesperson and a new marketing manager. And either, whatever the scenario is, one, it's rare that you're going to have equal experience between sales and marketing. Somebody's going to have more experience than the other. It's just going to be the nature of it. But it comes down to leadership, a clear delineation of who is responsible for what. If there's a lack of clarity as far as who's responsible for what is marketing responsible for, what are the deliverables, the expectations of them, their responsibilities, what is sales responsibility? If it's a place where it's unclear expectations and sales can just sort of run, in some cases, run over marketing and they get whatever they require, well, then that's just going to be sales dominated. That's not a collaborative team. That's just sales getting their way. And so it comes down to the sales leader, the chief revenue officer, ultimately the CEO, the owner, giving that clear direction and making sure that those boundaries are observed. Because if marketing, especially somebody new that's figuring things out, they launch a campaign that doesn't do well, or the sales team doesn't like it, it's navigating and making sure that there is a sense of humility between the two different sides, if you will, and making sure that person, whoever the new person is, it's making sure that they have what they need to be successful. And so part of that also goes to the culture of the business. If it's a place where there's a sense of humility and an understanding, a curiosity, wanting to make sure that everybody is equipped and they have the opportunity to succeed. And so really as a leader, it comes down to having clarity about what alignment means. What's the goal everybody's working towards, and making sure there's clarity of roles and responsibilities so that you avoid needless conflict there. So it's shared data, shared feedback, shared wins. It's culture of collaboration and the rhythms to keep it going.
Another point that you touched on before that I wanted to bring back up is this. Is it ever okay for marketing to say no to sales?
The answer is yes. And there are times that marketing should say no to sales. And let me also put this in the context of even the previous question of this goes back to company leadership to make sure that there are clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and expectations between marketing and sales, how they work together, who gets to make the decisions. If we make the assumption that it's a revenue team, so sales and marketing functioning together, led by a sales leader, maybe it's the CEO, depending on the size of the company, leading that team. And if they're doing what we suggest or what EOS suggests, and that's you operate in 90-day increments. So you have your priorities, you have your day-to-day responsibilities. And so the marketing person has the things that they are working on. They've been given priorities, expectations have been set. They are working on these things. So it's not unusual for ideas to come up midstream. Salesperson has something coming up and all of a sudden they need a slide deck prepared for this particular presentation or this particular event. And so in some cases, they might just go straight to the marketing person, say, I need this and I need this in the next 3 days, and it's going to take a bunch of time. Well, it might be, or maybe they wanted, maybe they decide, maybe it's something like that, or it could be, hey, we need to run this particular campaign. I just saw this other thing. Our competitors are doing it. We need to launch this email campaign, this social media campaign, whatever it is. So again, if we're assuming that this marketing manager has their responsibilities, their priorities that they've been given, they need the freedom to be able to say no. Or at least instead of just having to knee jerk and say, oh yeah, I can do that, having some sort of a mechanism where they can go back to whoever their manager is and clarify priorities. So this is what I've been given. These are the responsibilities that I have. However, I now have somebody else coming to me, asking me to do this particular campaign or this particular thing. Do you want me to shift my priorities? If I do, it delays this other thing. So that will be one scenario where they might say, you know what? No, we're not going to do this particular campaign. It's a great idea. We can consider this next quarter. We already have this other thing in motion. So in some cases, it's also not only protecting their capacity and the priorities that they have, but it's also protecting the plans that are already in motion based on what's been defined for that quarter. So to shift gears to do what's being requested might require a complete shift in focus that would get off track of what's been already mapped out. So sometimes it's a matter of, hey, you know what? We've committed as a team. We're doing this other thing. That's a great idea. We can take it and use it later. And in some cases, just the ideas aren't going to work marketing wise for whatever reason. And so again, that goes back to creating that alignment, the relationship between the teams where there can be this collaborative approach rather than one of demanding or sales having the trump card, if you will, over what gets done or not done.
The last stop on the framework is E, evaluate and adjust. This is a very common question that we get. What should a 90-day review actually look like? So, Steve, let's get tactical. Tell us.
So one element of this is taking a look back at the last 90 days and reviewing the priorities that were set and to see if those priorities were accomplished. We're looking at this from the standpoint of this is a planning session. So we're looking back, but we're also looking forward. So coming into the meeting, what were the priorities? Did we get them done? What's left undone? What kept us from getting those things done? It can also be a time to evaluate campaigns that ran longer than a month. We had a quarter-long campaign. What were the results of that? What did we spend? How many appointments were scheduled? How many customers did we get from that? What was the ROI? So it can be used to evaluate campaigns. And this is where I've mentioned it previously, having some sort of a scorecard. So when we're working with a coaching client, we have a 10-part scorecard based on our framework that we complete at every quarterly review to assess progress. So it's a self-scored assessment, and we go through and we use that to help determine what the priorities are for the next quarter. Part of it is evaluating campaigns, evaluating movement on priorities for the previous quarter, and then using the scorecard to determine overall progress and helping to determine what the priorities are for the next 90 days.
Okay, if I'm just getting started, what are the top 3 metrics that I need to be tracking?
We say 3, but there's really 5 sort of implicit in here. Number one, how much website traffic are you getting? Number two is how many leads are you getting from that traffic? And then I would say based on that, look at your close rate. Look at how many appointments or leads you're getting. And then ultimately, how many customers are you getting? But in between each of those steps, you have your conversion rate. So what percentage of website visitors become leads? What percentage of leads become customers? There's three, but really there's five because it's looking at those conversion rates.
Okay. Some people listening may not consider themselves a number person. So how can someone who will say, I'm not a numbers person, how can they embrace this concept of reviewing the data and converting what they're learning into action?
One, it starts by focusing on a few key metrics. I mean, the general rule is if you're looking at KPIs, key performance indicators, you're choosing with a small handful that give you some sense of what's happening and what's working and what's not. Those numbers give you a story. And so, especially as a CEO, even if your bent isn't naturally towards numbers, it's really the requirement of getting enough familiarity with what the numbers are so that you at least have a sense of what you start asking questions. And especially when you start looking at those numbers over the course of time, then you can see, are they moving up? Are they moving down? Are they moving in what we would think is a good direction? And if not, then digging in. And again, this is one of the places where sometimes it means asking for help. It means finding someone who is an expert in marketing or in analytics that can give you some insight. Using tools like ChatGPT, using it to help you analyze the data and give you insight, using it to help you figure out what questions to ask. But ultimately, if you're the one tasked with growing your business, these are metrics you've got to be looking at.
But finally, with regard to evaluate and adjust, how long should you wait before you pivot?
It depends on what we're talking about in terms of pivot. So at a micro level, if you're testing out specific elements of a campaign, like an email subject line, you can pivot pretty quickly because you can see from tests, this subject line worked, this one didn't. Especially if it's some sort of an ongoing campaign, some sort of a nurture campaign. Great, you see what's working, you get enough data, you just start changing things as you're going so that incrementally you're getting better results. So again, email subject lines are a good example of that. If we're thinking about a larger strategy or a larger plan and campaign, here again, it's going to be crucial that we're looking at the metrics and knowing how long is your buying cycle. If it's a long buying cycle, then it's going to take longer to make those determinations. If it's a quick buying cycle, then you can make those decisions faster. But ultimately, it's going to be looking at, are you getting ROI? And there's a threshold there of one, what's your tolerance? Because sometimes there's this concept in business of what's called the J curve. And the J curve is that when you implement something new, oftentimes you dip down. Your efficiency, your productivity, the results you're getting actually go negative or they decrease before they increase. For instance, we have a client where we're going to be managing their Google ad campaign. And typically what we'll tell people is you want to take the first 3 months to evaluate because it's testing different keywords, different ad combinations, different factors on the landing page. And it's taking that time to really get it rifled in. It's not always just a clear set time frame, but it depends on the nature of the campaign. What's your cost of customer acquisition? If your service or product is $50,000, you're probably going to have to spend more in order to acquire a new customer versus a service that's $5,000. So that goes into it as well. But I would say it depends on what the campaign is, the nature of it. There's some things that just take time to start seeing traction. If we're talking about generating traffic through search engines, well, that's committing for 6 to 12 months of creating consistent content and doing the different things that need to be done to optimize the website. There's a lot of variables, but it comes back to monitoring the activities and looking at what's a generally accepted timeframe or thought timeframe for that particular campaign, types of tactics, and then making decisions from that.
Okay, we've covered a ton of questions today, Steve. So before we land the plane, what do you want to leave the listener with?
I would say this, AnnieLaurie, don't let the apparent complexity of this stop you from getting started. We are really gearing this towards companies that are wanting to build and implement a marketing system that is going to help them grow and scale for the long term. And so the guide marketing framework isn't about executing your marketing perfectly. There is no such thing, but it's about giving you direction. It's giving you guardrails so that you can begin to identify the pieces of what go into building this marketing system so that you can grow and scale for the long term. It's like we've said with the quarterly planning meetings, pick something, pick one thing, pick a couple of things, make it better, and then pick the next. Start at the beginning, start with your plan. If you don't understand who your customers are, if you don't have clear messaging, all the other things aren't going to be as effective until you get those done. So there is an element of order to this, especially with generating your story and strategy. And especially with growing, scaling companies, marketing, it's a leadership function. Yes, there's absolutely an execution side of this, but as a leader, you have the opportunity and really the responsibility to create clarity, even if you don't have all the answers. And so using a framework like this, guide the conversation. It can give you, again, a common framework that can build alignment and help you make better informed marketing decisions that are going to move your business forward profitably.
Thanks, Steve. That's a great word. Let's wrap this thing up. So there you have it, your guide marketing framework questions answered. If you've been listening along and wondering, can we really do this? Yes, you can, one step at a time.
And you don't have to do this alone. Marketing is a team sport. If you haven't taken the free guide marketing assessment on our website, head over to wayfindmarketing.com, take the assessment. It is the fastest way to see where your marketing's strong, where it's stuck, and what to do next. And along with that, again, that gives you access to our marketing playbook. And it also gives you an opportunity, if you want to schedule a one-to-one call with me to walk through your results, we can do that and talk about what makes sense for you over the course of the next 90 days so that you can move forward and not stay stuck.
Marketing doesn't have to be a mystery. With the right framework, it becomes a system, one that helps you lead with clarity and grow with confidence.
Thanks for being a part of this journey with us. We will see you next time.